I met Natalie at a mutual friend's housewarming party. It wasn't one of those love-at-first-sight moments, more like something that made sense without effort. She was standing by the kitchen island, arguing with someone about whether homemade pasta was overrated. I wasn't part of the conversation, but I laughed at something she said, and she looked over and just smiled like I was already in on the joke. We talked for the rest of the night. Nothing deep. Just music, movies, food. I offered to walk her to her car even though she said she was parked right in front. We stood outside for 20 minutes anyway, pretending the weather wasn't freezing. We got married 4 years later. Steady, quiet years. No big drama, no breakups, just a gradual layering of shared routines and inside jokes and Sunday morning breakfasts. We were living in a modest townhouse back then. I worked for a logistics company, mid-level operations, long hours but reliable pay. She was in graphic design, mostly remote work, sometimes at agencies on contract. After the wedding, we bought a home a few miles from where I grew up. 3 bedrooms, fenced yard, nice corner lot. Not huge, but big enough for what we wanted, a family, space to grow, a dog eventually. We planted a little maple in the front yard the first week we moved in. She made me take a photo next to it. Said one day we'd look back and laugh at how small it used to be. 2 years in, our daughter was born, Ella. Quietest baby I'd ever met. Slept more than we expected, smiled even more. Natalie took to being a mom quickly. She handled every new thing, feeding schedules, pediatrician visits, weird rashes, like she was built for it. I was slower to figure things out, but she never made me feel behind. She'd say, "We're learning it together," even when I knew she was 5 steps ahead. We settled into our life without thinking too hard about it. Weekdays were predictable. Mornings were a blur of cereal and car keys and lost socks. I usually left before 7:30. Natalie worked from home most days, juggling Ella and deadlines, and somehow still managed to cook dinner most nights. On Fridays, we'd order in and eat on the couch with whatever show we were pretending to follow. She liked things clean, but not in a neurotic way, more like she couldn't think straight if there was clutter. I started noticing how she had a way of folding towels that made them look like they belonged in a hotel. She noticed how I always stacked dishes by height and color, even though I denied doing it on purpose. We didn't have the kind of marriage people wrote essays about. But it was ours, and it felt solid. We knew when to give each other space and when to lean in. We had fights, sure, mostly about time, money, the usual. But they passed. They always passed. Ella was 4 now. Talkative, always asking questions, already learning how to negotiate bedtime like a tiny lawyer. Natalie was working full-time again, back with a firm she liked. I had been offered a regional position, more hours, more pressure, but I was managing. We were busy. But not broken. Weekends were when we breathed a little. Saturdays usually started slow, cartoons for Ella, coffee for us. Natalie liked to take her to the farmer's market when the weather was nice. They'd come back with fresh bread, too many berries, and flowers she never bought the right vase for. I'd mow the lawn or handle whatever repairs had stacked up during the week. There was always something, loose cabinet hinges, squeaky doors, a gutter that never seemed to stay in place. Sunday mornings were for pancakes. Ella insisted on chocolate chips, and Natalie always let her dump them in even when it turned into a mess. We'd eat together at the kitchen table. After breakfast, Natalie would clean up while I sat with Ella in the living room, building whatever Lego project she was fixated on that week. Evenings were quieter now that Ella was getting older. She went to bed a little later, but once she was down, the house felt still. Sometimes Natalie and I would sit on the back porch with a drink. Other nights we'd be in separate rooms, me watching something in the den, her catching up on design work in the office. It wasn't distance. It was rhythm. We didn't go out much. Partly because we were tired, partly because we just liked being home. When we did, it was usually something simple. Dinner near the water. A movie we didn't really care about. Occasionally we'd call in a sitter and try for something fancier, but half the time we ended up back home early anyway, checking on Ella or just giving in to the quiet. Natalie stayed close with her sister, Mia. They'd text constantly, sometimes FaceTime while Ella played in the background. I didn't follow half their conversations, but Natalie would tell me the highlights, who was mad at who, which cousin got engaged, what Mia's kids were doing now. She liked being connected to people that way. She also kept in touch with a couple old coworkers. Mostly online. I knew a few names because they came up in passing. I didn't pay much attention to the details, just bits and pieces. Someone switching jobs, someone getting divorced. Normal stuff. Natalie wasn't secretive about it. She'd scroll through messages on the couch next to me, answer a DM while we watched something. Ella had started preschool 3 mornings a week. Natalie handled drop-off and pick-up. She liked being the one to do it. She said it was the one part of the day that always made sense. She'd come home and tell me little things Ella said on the drive, questions about clouds or why birds don't fall when they sleep. I got promoted that fall. Regional oversight, more travel, more long days. Natalie said she was proud of me. She made a cake the night it was official and Ella helped decorate it with too many sprinkles. I kept a photo of it in my phone. Just the 3 of us around the kitchen table, smiling, hands in motion, caught mid-laugh. Everything felt full. Not rushed, not heavy. Just full. We hosted Thanksgiving that year. Just family, her parents, Mia and her kids, my brother and his wife. Natalie cooked most of it herself. I offered to help, and she let me mash the potatoes and burn the rolls, like always. She was in her element, moving through the kitchen with her hair tied up, apron on, playlist going, sipping wine out of the coffee mug she liked better than the actual wine glasses. Ella wore a dress with little turkeys on it that Mia bought her. She spent half the afternoon under the table with her cousins, passing toys back and forth like they were running some secret trade deal. When everyone finally left and the dishes were stacked high, Natalie and I collapsed on the couch, too tired to even finish a movie. That night, as she dozed off next to me, I remember brushing a hair off her cheek and thinking about how strange it is, all the quiet, everyday things that make a life. December was busy. Ella had a winter concert at school. Natalie helped with costumes and brought snacks for the whole class. I took the day off to be there. Watching our daughter up there, shy but smiling, was one of those things that made everything else, the overtime, the stress, feel small. We kept things simple for Christmas. Gifts for Ella, hot cocoa, lights around the windows. Natalie said she didn't want anything big that year, just a weekend away in the spring, maybe somewhere warm. I told her we'd find something, just us. She smiled and kissed me on the cheek, and Ella groaned like she was being tortured. Work picked up again after the holidays. I was gone for a few overnights in January. Long drives, tight schedules, always with a laptop in my passenger seat. Natalie kept everything running at home. She'd send me updates, pictures of Ella's drawings, voice messages of her singing made-up songs. I'd listen to them alone in some hotel room 2 hours from the nearest anything. She never made me feel guilty for being away. Never once. February rolled in quiet. Rainy days, muddy shoes, school delays. Natalie started waking up earlier, getting in small workouts before Ella was up. She said it helped her energy, helped her stay focused. She bought a new yoga mat, cleared a corner of the living room, and actually stuck with it. Most mornings when I left, I'd see her there in the reflection of the window, headphones in, moving slow, focused. We started talking about a second kid. Nothing urgent. Just little moments, comments about how Ella would be a great big sister, how nice it would be to go through it all again now that we knew what we were doing. Natalie wasn't pushing, just wondering aloud. I told her I was open to it. The timing would never be perfect, but that didn't matter. Everything felt steady, familiar, and worth protecting. We took a short trip in March, just 2 nights in a cabin a couple hours north. Natalie found the place online, said it looked cozy and had great reviews. It rained almost the whole time, but none of us minded. Ella brought her books and built pillow forts, and Natalie lit every candle the place had, just for the atmosphere. We didn't do much. Played board games, cooked inside, walked the muddy trail behind the cabin during a short break in the weather. One night, after Ella went to bed, we sat by the fireplace and talked about the early days, the apartment, the wedding, the weird little jobs we both had before we figured anything out. Natalie said we should do this more often, just disappear for a couple days and let the rest of the world go quiet. I agreed. When we got home, it was back to normal, routines, school drop-offs, grocery lists, bills. Natalie had picked up a few extra freelance projects. Nothing overwhelming, just smaller contracts that filled in the hours while Ella was at school. She said she liked being busy. Said it made the days go faster. I was working longer hours, some weekend hours too. I'd leave before anyone woke up and come home after dinner once or twice a week. Natalie kept things moving. The house stayed clean, Ella's homework was always done, meals were ready. Sometimes I wondered if she was overdoing it, but she never complained. One Saturday afternoon, we were getting ready to go to Mia's for a barbecue. I was in the bedroom, ironing Ella's dress, and I saw Natalie in the mirror behind me, standing in the doorway on her phone. She was smiling, that soft kind of smile you make when you're reading something funny or nice. Then she looked up, saw me watching her, and tucked the phone away quickly. I didn't think much of it. We were in a rush. We got to Mia's late. Natalie said traffic was worse than usual, even though we'd taken the usual route. She said she had to stop for gas, didn't realize how low it was. We joked about it during dinner, how I always checked the car and how she never did. She laughed and called herself hopeless with anything mechanical. It was the kind of thing we always teased each other about. Ella fell asleep in the car on the way home. Natalie carried her inside and tucked her in while I cleaned up the back seat. When I came inside, she was already in the shower. I made us both tea, left hers on the counter, and went to bed. She joined me maybe 20 minutes later, towel drying her hair, wearing one of my shirts. She looked tired. I asked if everything was okay. She said, "Yeah, just a long day," and curled up next to me. We didn't talk after that. Just laid there. Her breathing evened out quickly, the way it always did when she was really out. It was a Wednesday when I got home earlier than usual. One of the regional warehouse managers canceled on me last minute, and I figured I'd skip the traffic and get a quiet hour with Ella before dinner. I didn't call ahead, just walked through the door around 4:30, expecting to hear the usual sounds, cartoons in the background, Natalie typing away in the office, the soft clatter of something cooking. Instead, it was quiet. I dropped my keys in the bowl, called out a soft, "Hey," and waited. A second later, Natalie's voice floated in from the living room, "Hey, you're home early." I stepped in and saw her sitting on the couch, phone in hand, legs folded under a blanket. She clicked the screen off and slid it under the throw pillow without missing a beat. "Everything all right?" I asked. "Yeah, just taking a break. Ella's at Mia's for the afternoon, I needed to focus, and they were making cookies or something." She smiled and stretched, pulling the blanket up over her lap like she hadn't just put her phone away as I walked in. I nodded and sat beside her. "Didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't." We sat for a while. Talked about Ella's upcoming school project, what to make for dinner. She leaned into me, relaxed, familiar. But still, something about the way she'd moved when I came in. Not guilty. Not startled. Just too quick. That night, I noticed she turned off her phone sound completely. Not "do not disturb" like she usually did after Ella went to bed, full silent, no vibration, screen face down. She kept it close, even while we watched a show together on the couch. Usually she'd leave it in the other room, charging. Around 9:30, she said she was tired and went up early. I stayed downstairs, flipping channels, not really watching. Eventually, I followed her. She was already asleep. Phone still face down on the nightstand. The next morning, she left before I did, said she was meeting a client for coffee to go over some design specs. It wasn't unusual. She handled most of her contracts in person now, at cafes or co-working spaces. At lunch, I looked at our messages. Nothing strange. Just a short text from her, "Hope the morning's going okay. That new warehouse giving you trouble yet?" And a heart emoji. I answered right away. She didn't reply for hours. That evening, Ella was full of stories from Mia's cookie disasters, some Disney movie on repeat, one of the cousins drawing mustaches on all the dolls. Natalie listened, smiling, asking questions. She made grilled chicken and rice, poured me a drink while the oven warmed. Nothing out of place. But when I reached for her phone by mistake, thinking it was mine on the counter, she was quick to grab it. "Sorry, habit," she said. "Just had it open to a recipe." I nodded. Didn't say anything. It wasn't about the phone. It wasn't about anything. Later that night, when Ella was asleep and the house was quiet, Natalie sat with me on the porch. "I feel like we've been passing each other lately," she said. "We should fix that." I agreed. She took my hand. Held it like she always did. Everything looked the same. But the feeling, the one I couldn't put into words, didn't go away. That week, Natalie started going out a little more often in the evenings. Nothing unusual at first. "Just errands," she said, "groceries, returns, picking something up for Mia." Once or twice she left after dinner, saying she needed fresh air and just wanted to walk around Target alone. I never questioned it. She didn't disappear for hours, and she always came back with something that made sense: dish soap, almond milk, snacks for Ella's lunchbox. Still, something shifted. She stopped asking if I wanted to come along. Before, even if we both knew I'd say no, she'd ask. Just a casual, "Want to ride with me?" That faded. One night she came home with a new top, beige, silky, low neckline. She said it was on sale and figured it would be nice for our next date night. She held it up in front of her and looked at me. I told her she'd look great in it, and she smiled, but didn't try it on. Just folded it neatly and put it away. The next evening, I heard her getting ready after Ella went to bed. She didn't say she had plans. Just walked past me in the hallway, light makeup on, wearing jeans and that new top. I stood in the doorway. "Going somewhere?" I asked. She glanced over her shoulder, already reaching for her bag. "Just a coffee. I've been staring at designs all day and my brain's fried. At this hour? It helps me reset. I'll be back in a bit." I didn't say anything else. She kissed the top of my head and walked out the door. I cleaned up the kitchen. Put away Ella's backpack. Stared at the dishes longer than I needed to. She came back about an hour later. Said the place was mostly empty. That she'd scrolled through Pinterest for 30 minutes and planned out Ella's birthday party in her head. It wasn't what she said. It was the way she moved through the story. Like she'd practiced it. Or maybe like she didn't care if I believed it. A couple nights later, I noticed something else. I got home late from work, around 8:30. Ella was already in pajamas, finishing up a cartoon on the couch. Natalie was upstairs, and I assumed she was getting ready for bed. I went up to change, and as I passed by the bathroom, I heard her in the bedroom, laughing softly, like she was on the phone. When I stepped into the room, she had her phone down by her side. The screen dimmed, black. "Hey," she said, casual. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just checking tomorrow's schedule." She locked the phone and dropped it on the dresser. I nodded. Changed clothes. The conversation drifted elsewhere. But the sound of that laugh stayed in my head the rest of the night. It was the kind she used with someone who made her feel seen. I hadn't heard it in a while. It wasn't the time of day, or how long she was out, or the clothes. It was in the details. The way her energy bent away from me in small, quiet ways. And I didn't know what to do with that feeling yet. The distance stopped being subtle. I felt it in the quiet parts of the day, the places where we used to fit together without thinking. Like mornings. We used to move around each other in the kitchen, passing the coffee mug, brushing shoulders, tossing each other half-awake smiles. Lately, Natalie had started waking up earlier and finishing breakfast before I even came downstairs. I'd find her already dressed, hair done, phone face down, plate rinsed and drying in the rack. She said she was just trying to start her days more focused. I told her it made sense. But I missed her in those early minutes, and she didn't seem to notice. One evening, she was sitting on the couch with Ella while I folded laundry on the other end of the room. Natalie was texting, not frantically, just steady. Tap, pause, tap. She smiled once, barely. I caught it. When she saw me looking, she tucked the phone under her leg and turned toward Ella like nothing had happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. She was next to me, breathing slow, turned away, phone plugged in across the room. I got up, walked down the hall, didn't know what I was doing. Ended up in the kitchen, staring out the back window like I was expecting something to be out there. But there wasn't. Just our yard, still as always. The next day I stayed late at work. Not because I had to, I just didn't feel like going home right away. I told myself I was giving her space. I told myself it wasn't avoidance. But when I finally walked through the front door, the lights were dim, and Natalie was curled up on the couch alone, headphones in. She didn't hear me at first. I stood there watching her for a second. Her face was soft, focused, completely elsewhere. She smiled slightly at something I couldn't hear. I walked a little louder, and she jumped. Sorry, I said. Didn't mean to sneak up on you. She pulled out one earbud. It's fine. I didn't realize how late it was. Everything okay? Yeah, just listening to music. What kind? She hesitated, just long enough for me to notice. Just an old playlist. She didn't offer to let me hear it. I didn't ask. Later, in bed, I reached for her. Not in any big way, just laid a hand on her hip. She tensed for half a second, then relaxed. I'm just tired, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I moved my hand and turned onto my back, staring at the ceiling in the dark. I wasn't angry. I wasn't suspicious in a way I could name. But something had shifted. Not in her, necessarily, but in the space between us. The way it felt fuller somehow, like something else had moved in and neither of us had the nerve to say it. The next morning, she left early again. Another client meeting. Another kiss on the cheek that felt like it belonged to someone else. That Thursday, I left work around noon. A storm had knocked out power at one of our sites, and the rest of my day meetings were pushed. I didn't tell anyone I was coming home early, figured I'd surprise Natalie and maybe grab lunch together. Just something normal, something small. I remember the sky was still gray when I pulled into the driveway. The blinds were mostly shut, but one in the bedroom was tilted just enough to let light through. I stepped inside quietly. The house wasn't silent, I heard something from upstairs. Not voices. Just motion. The kind that doesn't come from being alone. I called out, Natalie. No answer. I walked up the stairs. The hallway felt narrower than usual. The door to our bedroom was mostly closed, not latched, just resting in place. I reached for the knob and pushed gently. And that's when I saw them. Natalie. And him. The same man from before. The one I had forgiven her for. Same bed. Same room. Same look of panic on her face when her eyes locked with mine. It all happened in a second, but every detail stayed with me, her knee pulling up the sheet, the way his hand froze on her thigh, the sound of the breath I didn't realize I was holding. I didn't say anything. I just stared. He sat up, scrambling for his shirt. Natalie grabbed the blanket tighter around herself. "Wait," she said, like there was anything left to explain. I turned and walked out. My legs were steady, but everything else was vibrating, like my body was trying to catch up with what my mind had already accepted. I got in the car and sat there in the driveway, the engine off. Rain started hitting the windshield, soft and steady. She texted me 5 minutes later, "Please just come inside. Please." I didn't reply. I drove to a diner a few blocks away. Ordered coffee I didn't drink. Sat in a corner booth and stared at the plate of someone else's leftover toast. She had done it again. With the same man. After everything we'd been through. After the promises. After the therapy. After the nights we spent trying to stitch something back together she'd already ripped once before. And she brought him back into our home. Into our bed. That night, I didn't go back. I stayed at a friend's house, someone who didn't ask questions, just handed me a blanket and a place to breathe. By morning, the decision was already made. There was no working through it this time. There was no discussion to be had. It wasn't about anger. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was about finality. This was done. By the time I pulled into the driveway the next morning, I was clear on what needed to happen. No more talking. No more trying to salvage what had already been burned twice. She'd made her choice, and now I was going to make mine. The house was quiet when I walked in. Ella was at school, thank God. Natalie was sitting on the couch, waiting. Still in pajamas. Hair pulled back. She looked like she hadn't slept. "Can we talk?" she said, standing up. "No." She blinked. "Please, just." "No," I said again. "I'm not here to talk." I walked past her, straight to the bedroom. Grabbed the empty laundry baskets from the hallway closet and started filling them. Her clothes. Her shoes. Her makeup. Her jewelry. Everything that was hers. I didn't bother folding anything. Just packed with purpose. Quiet. Methodical. She followed me down the hall. "You're really doing this?" she asked. I didn't answer. "After everything, you're just going to." "You cheated on me," I said, turning to face her. "Again. In our bed. With the same guy. You don't get to ask questions." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She stood in the doorway and watched as I packed the last of her things into black trash bags, the ones we kept for yard work. I didn't even give her a suitcase. I loaded the bags into the back of my truck. All 6 of them. Tossed the baskets in too. Then I drove. He lived in a rental condo on the west side of town. I'd never been there before, but I'd seen the address once, back when it all happened the first time. Back when we had passwords to each other's accounts, back when I was still trying to believe we could come back from it. I parked right in front of his building. Walked to his door and dumped the bags, one by one, across the porch. Her clothes spilled into the walkway. I didn't bother fixing them. Just stood back, took a photo, and left. When I got home, she was still there. "You left my stuff at his place." "Yes." "You can't just do that." "I can," I said. And I did. Then I handed her a printed letter, from my lawyer. It was a notice of intent to divorce and a warning of legal action if her guest ever stepped foot on the property again. The house was in my name. I had the title. She didn't get to bring him in once, let alone twice. If he comes back here, I said, I'll press charges. This isn't his home. And you don't get to invite people onto property you don't own. She looked at the paper. Then at me. Her face changed, not angry, not even ashamed. Just, hollow. I want full custody, I said. And I'm not budging. You're punishing me. No, I said. I'm protecting my daughter. I gave her 20 minutes to collect whatever else she wanted. She left without another word. I locked the door behind her. And for the first time in weeks, the house felt still. Not broken. Just quiet. I changed the locks the next day. Not just for security, but for clarity. I didn't want to walk through that door again and feel like any part of it still belonged to her. I went room by room, clearing out anything that had her name on it, her charger cords, her bathrobe, a book she'd left half-finished on the nightstand. Anything she might have said she'd grab later, I boxed up and left in the garage. I didn't answer her texts. She only sent 3. The first was asking if Ella could call her that night. The second was asking when she could come by to get the rest of her things. The third was a photo of Ella's stuffed animal, left behind in the shuffle, followed by, please don't take this out on her. I replied to that one. Told her she could call Ella twice a week, Wednesdays and Sundays, between 6 and 6:30. On speaker, under supervision. That was the agreement until the legal process was sorted. She didn't push back. Not directly. I think she knew she'd already pushed past everything I'd ever given her the first time. Ella asked questions, but not too many. Why is mommy not here? Became, when is mommy coming back, and eventually, can we still do pancakes on Saturdays? I told her yes. I told her everything would stay the same, just with more time for extra syrup and cartoons. I called my lawyer the same week and made everything official. Divorce paperwork was filed. Custody petition drafted. The evidence, which I hadn't wanted to collect but now was glad I had, was enough to make it clear, I had grounds, and I wasn't out for vengeance. I wanted stability. I wanted my daughter safe and in a home where she wouldn't wake up in the middle of the night to whispers that didn't belong to her parents. The guy never showed up again. Not on the property. Not in my neighborhood. And if he knew about the trespassing notice I filed, he kept his distance. That was fine by me. I didn't need anything from him, not an apology, not an explanation. He could carry the shame, if he had any, on his own time. Mia, Natalie's sister, reached out. Said she didn't know what had happened, but she was here if Ella needed a familiar face. I said thank you, and that was it. No details. No rehashing. If Natalie wanted to explain herself to her own family, that wasn't my responsibility. The rest of the week was ordinary in the best possible way. I got Ella to school on time. Cooked dinner without overthinking it. Slept through the night. I even vacuumed out the car, just to do something that didn't feel tied to anything else. People always talk about heartbreak like it leaves you bleeding. But sometimes, it just drains the noise from your life, and what's left is something quiet enough to finally think straight. Spring came fast. The tree in the front yard, the one we planted our first year in the house, finally grew past the mailbox. Ella liked to stand beside it and tell me how tall she was compared to the branches. Every week, she was sure she'd gained an inch. Our new routine settled in more easily than I expected. Mornings had their rhythm again. I packed her lunch, she helped stir the eggs. She had a favorite hoodie now, light blue with a cartoon cat on it, and she insisted on wearing it every day until I finally bought her a second one to rotate in. The custody hearing was set for May. My lawyer was confident. There wasn't much to argue. The house was mine. Ella had stability here. I had everything documented. Natalie wasn't fighting it hard. She hadn't tried to push her way back in, not through the courts, not emotionally. She called during her scheduled times. Sometimes Ella wanted to talk. Sometimes she didn't. I never forced it. Natalie showed up once, unannounced. A Sunday morning, a week after I served the official notice. I opened the door and she was just standing there with a box in her hands. "I found some of Ella's drawings in storage," she said. "Thought she might want them." I looked at the box. Construction paper, glitter, folded hearts. Nothing I hadn't seen versions of before. "Thanks," I said. I took it from her. She didn't move. "She doing okay?" she asked. "She's doing fine." She nodded. "You look tired." "I sleep better than I have in months." That landed. She looked down. Then back up. "I know you probably hate me." "I don't," I said. "But I don't trust you. And I never will again." She swallowed hard. "I didn't plan for it to happen again. I swear to you, I didn't. But you let it happen. Same man. Same bed. Same lie." She didn't answer that. "I'm not trying to fix anything," she said. I wanted you to know I know what I lost." I nodded once. "Good." She asked if she could see Ella. I told her it wasn't her scheduled time, and she knew the rules. That was the end of it. She walked back to her car without another word. That night, Ella and I made spaghetti. She stirred the sauce while I drained the noodles. We played music while we ate, then curled up on the couch and watched the same cartoon we always do. She fell asleep halfway through, head on my chest. I carried her to bed and tucked her in. Sat there for a while just watching her breathe. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel broken. I just felt still. Everything I thought would fall apart didn't. Everything I thought I needed to hold on to turned out to be exactly what was dragging me down. Now I've got peace. I've got clarity. I've got my daughter, and the kind of quiet that doesn't feel like absence anymore. It feels like freedom.